I grew up on a beef farm in Missouri, about 80 miles west of St. Louis, and like everybody else that raised livestock, we raised a lot of our own feed, and we raised corn and soybeans and hay. And those of you that raise livestock, you know, you grind this stuff up into a flour, and you add your vitamins and minerals and trace minerals, and we made pellets, and we fed those calves for about 6 to 9 months, and then we shipped them off to other feeders or maybe to be butchered. And you always save back the very best ones for yourself, and you knock them in the head and eat them. It's a real simple cycle on the farm. And the thing that fascinated me as a teenager was that as a family, we ate out of the very same fields that those calves did. We kept back 5 rows of corn for ourselves. We had a garden at the end of the field where we grew our peas and beans and squash and tomatoes. And we wanted to live to be 100 with no aches and pains, but we did not give ourselves the same vitamins and minerals and trace minerals that we gave the calves. And I was always asking my dad, I'd say, hey, Pops, how come we go to all that trouble for the calves? We eat out of the same fields. We want to live to be 100 with no aches and pains, and you don't give us the same vitamins and minerals and trace minerals. What gives? Well, being an old Missouri farmer, my dad used to give me a lot of Missouri farm wisdom, and he'd say things like, shut up, boy. You're getting farm fresh food, fresh air, lots of free exercise. Don't ask complicated questions. Well, I was glad to get rid of the farm exercise and go on to ag school at the University of Missouri. And there I learned technical things about soil chemistry and how it related to tons and bushels per acre. I learned about ag economics, but I really didn't get an answer to my basic question, why for the calves and not for us, until I became a freshman veterinary student at the University of Missouri. And there I learned that the reason why we put all these vitamins and minerals and trace minerals into animal feeds, bottom line, is simply because we don't have health insurance for them. We don't have Blue Cross, Blue Shield, major medical, hospitalization, Medicare, and Medicaid for animals. And if we were to use a human healthcare type of system for animals, it'd be sticker shock for you. Your hamburger would cost you $275 a pound. Boneless, skinless chicken breasts would be $450 a pound. A dozen eggs would be $50 just to pay for the healthcare. So we learned that we could keep the price of animal products such as meat and dairy and poultry and eggs down to where the average American could afford to eat them every day simply by reducing or eliminating healthcare costs in animals. And we do this by preventing and curing diseases with nutritional formulas. Now, after graduating vet school, I went to Africa for a couple of years and got to work with Marlin Perkins from the old Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom days. That was kind of a kick. Got to play Frank Buck and use a tranquilizer gun and catch elephant and rhino. Spent 2 years tromping all over Central and South Africa. And after 2 years working on these big conservation projects, Marlin sent me a telegram and invited me back to the States. He'd actually gotten a $7.5 million grant from the National Institutes of Health. This was 35 years ago, and this was to study pollution, the environment, and the world ecology. And this combined the efforts of the St. Louis Zoo, the Shaw's Botanical Gardens, and Washington University's Department of Biology into one new department called the Center for the Biology of Natural Systems. And my job as the wildlife veterinarian on the project was to do autopsies of animals that died of natural causes in the big zoos around the United States. And I was supposed to identify a species of animals that was ultra-sensitive to pollution. And we're going to use that animal much like the old coal miners used to use canaries. You remember how that goes. They take the canaries down in the mine, and if methane gas or carbon monoxide were to leak into the mine, the canaries were more sensitive than the men, and they would drop off the perch and die long before the men were in danger of suffocating and blowing up. And to make a long story short, after some 12 plus years working directly with Perkins at the St. Louis Zoo and the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, the Bronx Zoo in New York, the LA Zoo and the National Zoo in DC, many other big zoos around the country, I had done some 17,500 autopsies and over 454 species of animals, plus 3,000 human beings for a comparison. And what I learned was that every animal and every human being who dies of natural causes dies of a nutritional deficiency disease. And I got all excited about nutrition again, and I wrote 75 scientific papers that were published in medical journals and veterinary journals. I had written some 15 chapters for 8 multi-author textbooks on the subject, wrote a textbook of my own that was 1,000 pages, 2,000 illustrations, and through the news releases of the big universities I worked with, I was on 20/20 with Hugh Downs and Geraldo before he got his nose broke for the first time. That was kind of a kick. It was in 1,700 newspapers around the world with the story through the UPI and AP Newswire service. And with all this public exposure and with all this scientific exposure, I couldn't get people who are in a position of authority, either in medical research or the government, to get too excited about preventing and curing diseases in human beings with nutrition like we did in animals. So I became frustrated enough. I went back to school up in Portland, Oregon, became a physician, and I practiced there for 12 years as a general family practitioner, and I delivered babies and sewed up chainsaw wounds and did the hemorrhoid circuit, you know, the basic stuff you do. But the thing that gave me the most pleasure, the thing that got me excited to put my pants on every morning and go to the office, was I was able to use everything I had learned in veterinary nutrition on my human patients. It was no surprise to me that the concept of preventing and curing diseases in animals with nutritional formulas works just as well in people. It works just like a charm. Well, I was always very honest with my patients. I put my veterinary degree on the wall next to the medical degree. And the new ones that didn't know me, they'd spot that veterinary degree first because it's twice as big. They say, "Doc, now look, I'm here for a physical. Am I in the right place? It looks like you're a horse doctor." And they get all nervous. And I'd have to give them some assurance that I wouldn't give them a rabies shot if they didn't deserve it. When I saw that they were from a farm or had something to do with livestock, I'd have a little fun with them. I used to keep in the top drawer of my desk one of those full-length obstetrical gloves that you use for AI and examine mares and cows with, and I put that on, and I wave it in front of their face, and I got two predictable reactions. Number one, their eyes would get as big as saucers, and they would immediately get into the basketball defense position. Secondly, when I break out the KY jelly and start lubricating that glove up in the armpit, they would back out of the examining room, never turning their back on me. It was kind of fascinating. And the nurses would always find them huddled behind the water cooler screaming that they were willing to give up their turn, that it wasn't their turn. But once they got used to my sense of humor, they'd start telling their friends and relatives, "Look, if you're not happy with what your doctor is doing for you, go see Wallach. Now, he'll treat you like a dog, but you get better." Over the years, we had a lot of fun. And I certainly learned a lot from those patients, and I like to think that I gave them some useful information. And what we're going to do tonight together is go over a lot of what they and I learned together. And if you take home just 10% of what I share with you, you're going to save yourselves an enormous amount of unnecessary misery. You're going to add many, many healthful years to your life, and you're going to save yourselves a gob of money. Now, my personal interest in health is longevity because it's something you can measure. And I always felt, ever since the days that I was in veterinary school, that a doctor would be a good doctor if he could help all his patients live to be 100. And there's two things that everybody agrees to who studies longevity. Number one, everybody agrees that the human being, including Americans like ourselves, have the genetic capacity to live healthfully to be 120 to 140. Secondly, everybody agrees that Americans do a lousy job when it comes to longevity. Our average lifespan is 75.5, about half what we're genetically capable of. And so I have two jobs tonight. Number one, I'm going to prove to you that even Missourians can live to be 120 if we do everything right. And secondly, I'm going to teach you how to do this in just 2 or 3 minutes a day. It's that simple. Jean Calment from France is one of my favorites. February 21st, 1995, according to the Guinness World Book of Records, she was documented as the oldest living woman in the world. There were dozens of women who claimed to be older than she, but they didn't have the paperwork to prove it. She had her paperwork all lined up to prove to the satisfaction of the Guinness World Book of Records that February 21st, 1995, that she was 120. February 21st, 1996, she turned 121. February 21st, 1997, she turned 122. And she died in August of 1997 at age 122 years and 162 days. She was 122 and a half when she died. She was bright and mentally alert until the day she died. She did not have Alzheimer's disease. She did not have cancer, diabetes, heart disease. She died suddenly of a stroke. She did have arthritis in her hands, obviously, and she was blind in her left eye. This is April of this year, 1998. This fellow here, by the name of Chudhuri, from Nepal, outside of the capital city of Kathmandu, died at age 141, and he was a beef farmer, so I guarantee you he wasn't a vegetarian. He lived to be 141. According to the article, he never set foot in a hospital or saw any kind of Western-type doctors, and that may be one of the reasons why he lived to be 141. This is an obituary from 3.5 years ago, January 1995. This is from the Rocky Mountain News Wire Service out of Denver, and they claim that this woman, Mazumi Dusti, out of Iran, died at age 161. And you have to give a lot of credibility to this obituary because Mazumi Dusti was survived by 6 living children ranging in age from 120 to 128. And according to her oldest son, she had never visited a doctor or gone to a hospital, never took any chemical medications or drugs, did use some herbs in her life. And again, here's a very old person who never went to a doctor. Then in January of 1973, the National Geographic, not the National Enquirer, but the National Geographic came out with a special issue of their magazine, and they looked at longevity as the feature article, and they picked the oldest person that they could find who had all the paperwork to prove it to the satisfaction of the National Geographic criteria. And they found a guy by the name of Sherali Mislimov, and Sherali Mislimov was documented as being 167 years of age. He was from Azerbaijan, a little country in the Caucasus Mountains of Western Russia, and they had a half-page picture of him in that January 1973 issue working as a field hand at age 167. He worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, harvesting tea leaves from a tea plantation. Now, 5 months later, Sherali Mislimov had a birthday. This was May of 1973. Had a birthday, and he turned 168, and he went out and hoed the garden for reporters to show how vigorous he was at age 168. He died just before his 169th birthday, left a wife who was only 107 years old. She was 61 years younger than he, and I think that's probably what did him in. A wife that's a little too young for him. I want you to appreciate that people do live to be 120, and people do it all the time. And unfortunately, Americans do a lousy job when it comes to longevity. 8.5 years ago, April of 1990, the World Health Organization examined the top 32 industrialized nations on Earth, and they looked at a lot of questions. They looked at the number of tons of fertilizer they use per year, how much industrial production they have. They also looked at health and longevity. This is the top 32 first world countries. They found out the United States ranked 17th in longevity. There was actually 16 other countries whose peoples live longer than we do. We didn't even rank in the top 10. We ranked 19th in healthfulness. It meant there were 18 other countries whose peoples live longer than we do before they develop heart disease, diabetes, cancer, arthritis, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's. We didn't even rank in the top 10 there. What this means is we have the highest priced healthcare system in the world, but not the best. We have the most technologically advanced healthcare system in the world, but not the best. There's a serious piece of information missing here to help us live healthfully to be 100, and that's what we're going to go over tonight. Now, before we get to the bottom line of what it takes to live healthfully to be 120 to 140, there's about 6 or 8 myths that are perpetuated by the orthodox medical profession and some alternative healthcare practitioners that we need to eliminate, because if you follow their instructions explicitly and completely, you're not going to live to be 100. First myth we're going to look at has to do with vegetarianism. I found this great article that was published by a team from the University of Chicago. It was published in 1947, and they looked at 2 groups of weanling rats. These were weanling rats that had been just weaned off the mother's breast milk. They gave one group of these weanling rats a vegan diet. This is a vegetarian diet that absolutely had no animal products in it whatsoever. Just contained grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, and they lived on the average to be 555 days, not quite 2 years. They took the second group of weanling rats, and they gave them the same grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, but they also added red meat, dairy, and eggs to their diet. And they lived twice as long, 1,020 days, as the vegan rats. Now, vegetarians were quick to jump in and say, well, the reason why those vegetarian rats didn't live as long as the meat-eating rats is because they were not allowed to do meditation and yoga. So let's see if human vegetarians do any better. About 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, May of 1996, I was in Colorado and picked up the local newspaper. They did a study. The state of Colorado did this wonderful study, and they showed that there were 415 centenarians, and they were very proud of this. So they sent out a team of social workers with a 5-page questionnaire, and then eyeball to eyeball asked them the questions on this 5-page questionnaire, looking for a common thread. What was it that got them to live healthfully to be 100? What they found out was this: 2/3 of these 415 centenarians were women, 1/3 were men, so you guys can live to be 100 if you do everything right. They found out that every race, every religion, every culture was represented, so there did not seem to be any monopoly when it came to health and longevity by any particular race, religion, or culture. The oldest person they were talking to in Colorado was 111. The only item on the 5-page questionnaire that 100%, all 415 checked and said this was a major factor in their living healthfully to be 100, was that they were all heavy red meat eaters. There was not a single vegetarian in the bunch, and that's significant because this was just a random study. Nobody set this study up. They just took all the living centenarians and checked it out. Every one of them ate red meat twice a day at least. 85% of them still worked after the age of 100. These were not infirm people. They did the family paperwork, they paid the bills, they babysat, they cooked, they cleaned house, they gardened. Number 3, 75% took a nip of whiskey every day. Now there's 2 things you want to remember about this study. Number 1, the twice a day thing is the red meat, not the whiskey. Number 2, there was not a single vegetarian in the bunch. Now, if you want to be a vegetarian for emotional reasons or spiritual reasons or religious reasons, this is America, and people will support your right to do that. But don't become a vegetarian because people get you panicked and think that vegetarianism is a healthier way to live. It just isn't. There's not a single shred of evidence from either animal studies or human studies that show that vegetarianism is healthier than meat eating. Is really just the opposite. Then there's the subject of exercise. But again, being a scientific type, if exercise is a major factor in living healthily, be 120, then professional athletes should live longer than couch potatoes in America. And so I looked at professional athletes, and sure enough, these guys and gals, even though they spend their junior high and high school and college and their middle years, their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and sometimes, depending on the sport, even their early 50s, they don't live as long as couch potatoes. Couch potatoes live to be 75.5, and the average professional athlete lives to be 62 to 68, depending on the sport. So there's something wrong with this concept of exercise is good for him. Why is it that athletes don't do as well as couch potatoes? Well, that's because athletes sweat more in 5 years than couch potatoes do in 75 years. And when you sweat, you're not just sweating out Gatorade, you're sweating out all 60 essential minerals. And they're called essential minerals because if they're missing for any length of time, you get some horrible degenerative disease, many of which are life-threatening. So who's more likely to die of one of these life-threatening mineral deficiency diseases? Somebody who sweats out quarts and quarts of water every day while training and exercising, or a couch potato who lays on the couch belching in an air-conditioned room saying, honey, bring in the popcorn, I'm changing the channels. Well, the bottom line piece of information here is that you don't need to be an athlete to sweat. You can be a farmer, you can be a contractor, work in construction business, you can be a roofer, a plumber, or an electrician, you can be a carpet layer, you can work in a bakery, you can work in a oven room in a Pizza Hut, you can work in one of these State Farm automobile insurance agencies and crank the air conditioning down during the summertime to where you have to wear a sweater and you never sweat at your place of business or work. But you know you're inactive all day, so you belong to a health club and you go do your jazzercise and stair steppers and treadmill, whatever it might be, and you sweat. Exercise without replacing those minerals you sweat out, exercising without supplementation is in fact suicide. If you're going to exercise, that's fine, but be sure you supplement with all essential nutrients, including the essential minerals. Otherwise, exercise will be a negative in your life and not a positive over the long haul. Then, everybody in America has a paranoia about salt. Now, what's the first thing that a farmer puts out for his livestock? Big salt block, isn't it? And there's nobody out in the pasture telling a cow she's limited to 1 lick a day, is there? I never liked to believe that my human patients were dumber than a cow, so I said, look, go ahead and pick up your salt shaker and you'll notice that lightning doesn't strike you. You can go ahead and salt your food to taste. You can put salt all over your body. Nothing bad's going to happen. And 98% of my patients just loved it. They brought me hundreds of new patients every month that wanted to eat that way. And the 2%, the bean counters, they say, Wallach, we love you and respect you, but we have a high-priced cardiologist that says you're flying in the face of all the weight of medical evidence. You can't tell people they can use salt. They're going to get hypertension and heart disease and stroke. Well, I have been redeemed in this one, in this view. This was a study that was published by the American Heart Association at their annual meeting in Portland, Oregon, July 1997, a little over a year ago. Doctors lack proof that too much salt is unhealthful. After years of telling healthy people that too much salt isn't good for them, researchers still don't have solid evidence to back up that claim. There's actually never been a single study which shows that restricting salt will prevent high blood pressure or hypertension or heart disease. There's never been a single study which shows if you have hypertension, high blood pressure, or heart disease, that restricting salt is of any benefit. That's a total myth. Now, another paranoia in America has to do with saturated fat. Everybody in America is terrified about saturated fat. You're going to plug your arteries with all this gooey cholesterol and saturated fat. My personal credo is that a day without a hamburger is like a day without sunshine. I try to eat a half-pound hamburger every day, and I can tell you I did that today, so I'm feeling fit. Now, 98% of my patients loved it, and they brought me hundreds of new patients every month who wanted to salt their food to taste and eat red meat every day. The 2%, the bean counters, went ballistic, and they say, Wallach, you know, you're flying in the face of all the weight of medical evidence. You can't tell people to do that. I have a high-priced cardiologist that says if you eat saturated fat, you're going to plug your arteries with all this gooey cholesterol and saturated fat. Well, this study was published by JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is the most prestigious medical journal in America, maybe the world. They said, in fact, that if you increase your saturated fat intake by 3% above the national daily average, which is 30% of our calorie intake, you decrease your risk of stroke by 15%. And they went on to say in the study in JAMA that if you increase your intake of saturated fat from red meat, eggs, and dairy by 9%, you decrease your risk of stroke by 45%. Just the opposite of what a doctor will tell you. Then there's this age-old battle between butter and margarine. There was a great study which is called the Harvard Nurses Health Study. They took 90,000 nurses. They gave 45,000 of these nurses butter as their spread and their cooking shortening. They gave 45,000 nurses margarine as their spread and cooking shortening. And after 20 years, they looked at the results and they were shocked because the nurses who had used margarine instead of butter had 75% more heart attacks than the ones that used butter, just the opposite of what most people believe. Margarine, in fact, is the worst type of fat for the heart. It increases your risk of heart disease of many kinds. Margarine increases your risk of cancer, also increases your risk of Alzheimer's disease. So if you have any margarine at home, I want you to box it up and ship it to a communist somewhere. The biggest fraud that was ever perpetuated in the American public is this cholesterol thing. Last year, Americans spent $117 billion for cholesterol testing. $117 billion for cholesterol testing, and It didn't add 10 seconds to the American longevity. Now, how many of you can ever recall a veterinarian getting upset by your dog, your cat, or your livestock's blood cholesterol? Anybody recall that? No. We've known for 75 years that cholesterol is not a problem. It's an indicator. There's not a single disease that's caused by too much cholesterol in your diet, I'm quoting now, too much cholesterol in your diet, unquote, or a high or elevated blood cholesterol. There's just not a single disease. Cholesterol is, in fact, an indicator, not a problem itself. And so knowing all these facts, I used to tell my patients, look, I want you to eat 2 eggs every morning for breakfast. And 98% of my patients just loved it. I mean, these were people who say, gosh, Wallach is all right. He lets you eat 2 eggs every morning for breakfast like an American should. And they brought me hundreds of new patients. They got to use butter instead of margarine. They were able to use red meat, a half a pound of red meat every day, and salt their food to taste. And then there were the 2% the bean counters. Say, Wallach, we love you and respect you, but we have a high-priced cardiologist says you're flying in the face of all the weight of medical evidence. People shouldn't eat more than 1 egg a week. Well, I've been redeemed in my view. This was a study that was done by the American Heart Association and reported at their annual meeting in Anaheim, California, November 15th, 1995, and they said 2 eggs a day won't hurt. They finally did the study they should have done 60 years ago. They took 141 healthy volunteers between the ages of 35 and 65 who had an average blood cholesterol of 227, which is quite normal. The normal range of blood cholesterol for human beings is 220 to 270. So 227 is at the lower end of the normal range. If you have a doctor who wants you to get your blood cholesterol down below 200, you want to flee from that doctor because they will kill you. If you get your blood cholesterol down below 200, there's an enormous number of studies that show that you increase your risk of death from intracranial hemorrhage and stroke by 200%, liver cancer by 300%, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by 200%, depression and suicide by 200%. Why would anybody want to have their blood cholesterol down below 200? Well, remember, the average lifespan of medical doctors in America is 58. So why would you want to listen to any longevity advice from a profession whose average lifespan is 58? Now, if doctors lived to be 150, you'd hang on every word they had to say about longevity, wouldn't you? This is New England Journal of Medicine, which is a wonderful clinical journal. Dr. Fred Kern Jr., MD, wrote this article, says, normal plasma cholesterol in an 88-year-old man who eats 25 eggs a day. You have to ask yourself a couple of questions. First of all, why was this old dude eating 25 eggs a day? Number one, he might not have had any teeth and couldn't eat steak anymore. Number two, 95% of the weight of testosterone, male sex hormone, is in fact cholesterol. And this was before Viagra, and maybe he was trying to get his libido up. I love arthritis because it's easy to fix. And according to almost all doctors, when you reach 40, 50, 60 years of age, there's not much you can do about rebuilding your bone. You've built whatever bone you can, and the only thing you can do is slow down the loss when you hit 40, 50, 60. And this is by doing exercise, maybe supplementing with a little calcium, maybe taking some estrogen. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going to take any estrogen. And I know that by seeing a lot of patients, that just taking Tums or calcium citrate and calcium lactate and calcium gluconate and calcium carbonate doesn't work very well. And according to the Center for Disease Control, 75 to 80% of all Americans over the age of 50 have arthritis of one type or another, or to one degree or another. According to the Center for Disease Control, 35 million to 50 million baby boomers are going to get arthritis in the next 7 to 10 years, and there's not a single medical treatment designed to fix it or prevent it. That's pretty scary. Now, if you look at the drugs they use, aspirin certainly doesn't fix arthritis, can cause gastric bleeding and death. Tylenol doesn't fix arthritis and causes 40,000 cases of kidney failure each year, 5,000 which are so severe you need a kidney transplant. Then there's ibuprofen, Advil, and Aleve. Those things don't fix arthritis. They do cause liver damage in 15% of the users. Even if you don't drink, you can get liver cirrhosis and have need for a liver transplant. Then there's methotrexate and gold shots. Those things certainly don't fix arthritis. They subdue your bone marrow so you can't make normal platelets and red blood cells and white blood cells. And if a pregnant woman uses methotrexate for arthritis, she has a high probability of having a baby born with spina bifida because methotrexate actually interferes with the body's use and the cellular use of folic acid, which we know a folic acid deficiency can cause as many as 50% of the cases of spina bifida. Then there's prednisone and cortisone. They don't fix arthritis. They subdue your immune system, which leaves you open to diseases far, far more horrible than arthritis. And we have the fact that prednisone and cortisone will actually accelerate the loss of minerals from your bones. Now, when these over-the-counter prescription medications don't work anymore to relieve pain and inflammation, the only thing left for you medically is joint replacement surgery. They want to put in new knees and hips and fingers and fuse your vertebrae together. And I never like to refer any of my patients in for these procedures because they never work out well. They always have to redo them and tinker with them. I never felt good about sending my patients in for something and being able to look them in the eye and say, go do this, because I knew it never worked. Well, the advantage my patients had over the years is I'm a veterinarian as well as a physician, and we don't have Blue Cross, Blue Shield, major medical hospitalization, Medicare, and Medicaid to pay for nonsensical surgical and mechanical and drug treatment for nothing more than a calcium deficiency disease. So I looked into my veterinary background, and sure enough, we have all these nutritional formulas designed to prevent and cure all kinds of diseases in animals, including arthritis in pigeons, turkeys, dogs, cats, sheep, pigs, horses, cows, lions, tigers, and bears. And I adapted many of these for human use. And the one that works for people the best, I call Dr. Wallach's pig formula. Now, before I tell you what that is, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. First of all, how many of you have ever seen that red warning light come on the dashboard of your car or truck? How many of you have seen the red warning light come on? Sure, just about everybody in the room. If you've been driving for any number of years, you've seen a red warning light come on because it indicated you didn't have enough coolant, not enough oil, you've thrown a fan belt, maybe you burst a radiator hose, and a righteous person, a reasonable person, is glad that that red warning light come on because it's telling you you're going to burn your engine up if you don't go do something properly with that engine. So you pull over to the side of the road, you lift up the hood, you wait till all the steam gets out of there, and you top off your coolant. You, in fact, top off your oil. Ladies, if you have pantyhose on, you can use that as a temporary fan belt. The only hard part is you have to remember how it goes through the pulleys, so you may want to map that out before you actually need it, and keep that in your glove compartment. You can actually use pantyhose, which are quite stretchy. You can use them as a bandage around your radiator hose, and it'll hold it together. It'll bind that radiator hose together so it'll hold water while you get to a service station. Now, an unreasonable person, when they see that red warning light come on, they're going to be upset. They're going to be miserable. I'm going to miss half the movie. I'm going to miss half the movie Titanic or Saving Private Ryan, whatever it is. No, wait a minute. I don't have to suffer. I don't have to be miserable because of this red warning light. So you whip out your pliers, you cut the wire of the red warning light, you close the hood, and you drive on 100 miles an hour trying to catch up on the lost time, and you just disregard that red warning light. You don't see it anymore because you cut the wire. Now, the reason I share that with you is because when you take a painkiller or an anti-inflammatory for joint pain or bone pain, all you're doing is cutting the wire of the red warning light. It fixes nothing. It is actually criminally negligent for a doctor to give you a painkiller and an anti-inflammatory for joint and bone disease without rebuilding the joint at the same time. When you have pain in your hip and your knee and your shoulder, your back and your neck, your fingers, your wrists, your elbows, your body's saying, don't use that joint. That's your red warning light. Pain is a red warning light. Don't use this. Because if you just take a painkiller and anti-inflammatory, you're going to wear that joint out faster and faster and faster. Doesn't fix anything. Second question, how many of you have ever done that little experiment where you take a chicken drumstick, eat the meat off the bone, put the cleaned up chicken drumstick bone into a quart of white corn vinegar and leave it on the shelf for a month? Every medical student, every nursing student, every dental student, every veterinarian should do that little experiment every month for the years they're in school. It is that important. Because what happens is that this vinegar will leach the minerals out of the bone and leave a rubbery collagen matrix, a bone matrix, which makes up 25 to 40% of the bone weight. 40% when you're a child and 25% when you're an adult. And you'll retain no calcium that you supplement with if you don't build up new bone matrix. That's why doctors erroneously say that if you supplement with calcium, you can't rebuild your bones, because you have to also be building bone matrix at the same time. The last myth that we're going to look at before we get into the bottom line here is cancer. You can get a nutritional protection. This was proved very nicely in human beings almost 2 years ago now by the medical school at the University of Arizona. They took 1,300 people for 10 years in a double-blind study. These were people who drank and smoked and ate fried foods and did all the bad things you're not supposed to. And they gave them 250 micrograms, 1/4 of 1 milligram of selenium every day. And here's what happened. They had a reduction in the rate and the risk of esophageal cancer by 71%. Fellas, they had a reduction in the rate of prostate cancer by 69%, greater than 2/3, simply by supplementing with 250 micrograms of selenium every day. They had a reduction in the rate of colon and rectal cancer by 64%, almost 2/3, by supplementing with 250 micrograms of selenium every day. They had a reduction in the rate of lung cancer, whether they smoked or not, by 48%. They cut their lung cancer risk almost in half simply by supplementing with 250 micrograms of selenium every day. Then in a parallel study, ladies, from the University of California, San Diego, 250 micrograms of selenium every day reduced the risk of breast cancer by 50 to 80% depending on the type of breast cancer, and there's absolutely no side effects. And yet doctors don't tell their patients about this. They don't put this information in the waiting room. They don't publish it or post it on the bulletin board. That's because doctors get nothing for giving you this nutritional advice. This coming September will be 41 years that I spent doing biomedical and clinical research in animals and human beings, and I have literally looked at health and longevity thousands of ways over those 41 years. And I can tell you that that would be kind of complicated if everybody had to do that. But if you boil it down to two concepts, it makes it very simple. Two basic concepts. Concept number one I refer to is avoid stepping on the landmines. This is where you don't want to throw away your healthy physical body wastefully. You don't want to smoke. You don't want to abuse alcohol. Having a glass of wine with dinner, or maybe a couple of beers on a hot day is okay, but I wouldn't get drunk every night. You don't want to take drugs. You don't want to do street drugs, and you don't want to take prescription drugs if at all possible. According to the U.S. News and World Report, January of 1994, there's 148,000 deaths in hospitals alone each year as a result of drug interactions. It's called polypharmacy, where 2 or 3 doctors will give a patient in the hospital 2 or 3 different drugs or 5 different drugs. They're administered correctly by a nurse, but they interact inappropriately, and 148,000 Americans are killed each year by these drug interactions. Drugs, just because a doctor prescribed them, doesn't mean they're safe. Corey Kristen from Houston, Texas, had ADD, attention deficit disorder, not normally thought of as a fatal disease, but the pediatrician who treated him prescribed an antidepressant medication called imipramine, kind of like Prozac or Ritalin, and the kid dies within weeks after getting the prescription. Everybody's upset. Well, the pharmacist didn't put the proper insert in. The doctor didn't read the PDR. Nobody read the PDR and saw that a more common side effect of this drug is death. All you had to do is get this kid off of sugar, no sugar, natural or processed. All you had to do is give him lithium, chromium, and vanadium, and within days he'd be clinically normal. But they had to give him this drug. Right now there's 5 million American kids on Prozac and Ritalin and imipramine going to school. American youth is being drugged and totally unnecessary, and all they have to do is be gotten off of sugar. It's criminal to be selling Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and candy in machines in the hallways of our schools and then wonder why kids shoot each other in there. Every one of those kids who shot their teachers and the kids at school were on Prozac or Ritalin. Every one of them was a hyperactive kid. It doesn't mean that every hyperactive kid is going to get that violent, but it means there's a percentage who will. There's some little clues. If they're a teenager and they wet the bed, if they like to play with fire, if they're cruel to little kids and little animals and so forth, the odds these are the dangerous ones. And so if you know a kid or a grandkid who's like that, you want to be sure to get them off of sugar and get them on the lithium, chromium, and vanadium, because there's nothing more frightening than a 14-year-old with a gun or a 18-year-old with a cleaver in his hand who's angry with you. Lastly, if at all possible, concept number one, you want to avoid going to a doctor because given half a chance, they will kill you. If you remember my tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, there was actually by 1996, August of 1996, there was something like 35 million of those tapes sold already by then. Well, doctors were just in shock. They said, hey, there's no way that we do all those things that Wallach says. We're not that dumb. And one of the things that really upset the doctors out of those 12 little one-liners in there that were meant to stimulate them was a statement that I made that was actually a quote out of Ralph Nader and Sidney Wolf's study. It was a 3-year study on terrible things that go on in hospitals, and they published this study in January of 1993, and they said that doctors kill, this is a quote now, and they use the kill word, doctors kill 150,000 to 300,000 Americans each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. So Harvard Medical School says, look, we're going to save the profession from Wallach's lies. Now, I was just reporting what Ralph Nader said, right? But it's Wallach's lies. And so they created a study that they turned over to the RAND in Boston, which is kind of like a Gallup poll that does these studies. And so nobody could accuse Harvard Medical School of tampering with the results. And here's what happened. You notice the title of the article is Examining the Casualty Count. In military terms, casualty count is killed and wounded. This was November 5th, 1996, and this is on the front page of the USA Today. And they said, remember, this is Harvard Medical School and the RAND, not Joel Wallach. Doctors kill 180,000 Americans each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. Now you notice they didn't give a range. I guarantee you they didn't, because the upper end of their range was higher than the 300,000 that Ralph Nader gave. They also said that doctors injure 1.3 million Americans each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. And you add those two figures together, you get 1.5 million casualties inflicted on the American people each year by the medical trade or the medical profession. You say, why aren't people upset with this? Why aren't people marching up and down in front of hospitals with placards? Now this just came out in March of 1998. This is from the Center for Disease Control. This was in the USA Today newspaper. It was in every newspaper in America. 2 million Americans are infected each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. According to the CDC, it's simply because doctors don't wash their hands. Why are we concerned about Saddam Hussein sending over a teacup full of bacteria when we have one profession that infects 2 million Americans each year out of medical negligence? Now you add these 2 million infections a year to 1.5 million casualties already chalked up. That's 3.5 million casualties inflicted on the American public each year by the medical profession, and nobody gets upset. Lastly, concept number 1, avoid stepping on the landmines. You want to make sure that when you go to a doctor, you get one that knows how to use a stethoscope. According to JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, just about 1 year ago, September 1997, only 20% of the graduating doctors know how to use a stethoscope today. 80% don't know how to use the basic tool of the medical profession. That's because they've learned in 14 years of medical school that it only takes 1.5 seconds to say, get a CAT scan. And according to the Reader's Digest, September 1993, doctors get, on the average, a kickback of $421 every time they refer somebody in for a CAT scan or an MRI. So anytime a doctor comes to you and says, look, here's all the lab work, here's what I believe you have, and here's our treatment options, you never want to shrug your shoulders and say, well, doc, I don't know, you're the expert, whatever you say. I know that you get 3 bids and quotes when you put on a new roof on your house and you want to see a testimony book that says they don't get tar in your car paint, leave nails in the driveway, and you get 3 bids and quotes when you put a new fence around your backyard and refinish your driveway. Don't think your physical body is any less valuable than your roof, your car, your driveway, or your fence. That's concept number 1. Avoid stepping on those landmines. Concept number 2. Now that you've avoided these landmines, you're in a good position to go on to live healthily to be 100 if you just but give your body all the essential nutrients so it can develop properly, maintain, and repair itself. That includes 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, and 3 essential fatty acids. And they're called essential nutrients for 2 reasons. Number 1, your body cannot manufacture them. You must consume them either as food or as supplements. Number 2, if any one of these essential nutrients is missing for a couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years, depending on the nutrient, you're going to get on the average 10 deficiency diseases. If you supplement properly, you have every honest expectation of seeing some significant benefit. Some people will actually get 100% better. Now my favorite article, which is a very objective article, came out April 6, 1992, 6.5 years ago, The Real Power of Vitamins. And they use the term vitamins here to mean vitamins and minerals. Nobody ever says, honey, did you take your minerals this morning? Everybody says, honey, did you take your vitamins this morning? But they mean vitamins and minerals. The Real Power of Vitamins. New research shows how they may help fight cancer, heart disease, and the ravages of aging. If you haven't read it, I'd urge you to go to a public library, school library, dig it out and read it. There were 6 positive pages. There was only 1 negative sentence, and as you might guess, it was offered by a medical doctor who was asked by the writer of the article, what do you think about vitamins and minerals and trace minerals as a supplement for human nutrition? And here's what he said, quote, popping vitamins doesn't do you any good, sniffs Dr. Victor Herbert, a professor of medicine at New York City's Mount Sinai Medical School. We get all the vitamins we need in our diets, and taking supplements gives you expensive urine, unquote. Now, Missouri translation of that is you're just peeing away your money if you take vitamins and minerals and trace minerals as supplements, because you might as well wad up your dollars and throw them in the toilet. You can get everything you need from your 4 food groups. Well, that little sentence, you can get everything you need from your 4 food groups, has killed more Americans than all the foreign enemies put together in the 220 years of intonation. And I'd rather pee out 50 cents or $1 a day worth of excess vitamins and minerals and trace minerals. That's cheap insurance. If you don't invest 50 cents to $1 a day into taking in essential nutrients that's going to help you develop properly and maintain and repair yourself, as sure as God made little green apples, you're going to spend a lot more money in that paying the doctor. Okay, you're going to develop the doctor's lifestyle every time you pay him hard cash out of your own pocket, indirectly through insurance, indirectly through taxes and Medicare. Not a single penny of that money goes to better understand, manage, treat, prevent, or cure catastrophic diseases in kids, breast cancer in women, prostate cancer in men, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, diabetes. When you pay your doctor, you're paying his mortgage, you're paying his Mercedes payment, you're paying the tuition for his kids to go to Harvard Medical School, or worse yet, you're paying the tuition for his kids to go to Yale Law School. That's all we need is a bunch of Yale lawyers running around. And we got a whole White House full of them now, and look what's going on in there. Well, that's why they call me the Rush Limbaugh of alternative health. Now, before we get into the last 6 slides, I'm going to give you 5 early warning signals. And if you pay attention to these 5 early warning signals, which are so simple that any 5-year-old can recognize them. If you pay attention to these 5 early warning signals and react appropriately and do the righteous thing, you're literally going to add 20, 30, 40, 50 years to your life. Very healthful years. Early warning signal number 1, white, gray, and silver hair. And I see quite a bit of white, gray, and silver hair in here tonight in various stages. I see people who have colored their hair in hopes of getting around the problem. And if it was just a cosmetic problem, it'd be okay, because men gain a lot of wisdom when they get some gray hair. They look very professorial, and people tend to have a lot more respect for them. And women can look very beautiful. They get their nice curly hairdos and put a little tint in there. It just looks nice. But there's more sinister things going on in the inside when you have white, gray, or silver hair, because copper is required as a cofactor to manufacture hair pigment. Doesn't matter if it's blonde, red, brown, or black. And if you have white, gray, or silver hair, you have a copper deficiency. Copper is also required as a cofactor to manufacture the elastic fibers in veins and arteries. When you get a copper deficiency sufficient enough to give you white, gray, or silver hair, you're going to get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your veins and arteries. You're going to get spider veins, varicose veins. You're going to get hemorrhoids, which are varicose veins in your exhaust pipe. These things can be unsightly. They can be painful. They can certainly be debilitating. They can, in fact, be life-threatening if you get a thrombosis or a blood clot in there. Also, you're going to get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your arteries. You're going to get a breakdown of the elastic fibers in your arteries. And you get an aneurysm. When you get one of these aneurysms, you can get a bleeding-type stroke in your brain. You can actually get a bleeding death. You can actually bleed to death when you get a ruptured aneurysm in your brain, your coronary artery, aorta, pulmonary artery. And I'll give you an example. This fellow here, Dr. Stuart Cartwright, age 38, good-looking kid. I mean, this guy could have been a movie actor, I'm sure. He looks very fit, so I'm sure he jogged or got on one of those stair steppers, or maybe played tennis or did something. And he drops dead in his home from a ruptured coronary artery aneurysm at age 38, a simple copper deficiency. He's sweating. Remember, he's athletic. He sweat out his copper, didn't replace it properly. And the nice thing is, if you supplement within 60 to 90 days, almost always that hair color will begin to come back. It starts at the nape of the neck, moves up over the crown of the head, then down the sides. And I'm going to be honest with you, you're going to look like a pinto pony for a couple of months, because it doesn't come in uniformly. But stick with it, because as that hair color is coming back, you're actually healing the elastic fibers in your veins and arteries. And thousands of people every year will find, just like we say, their arthritis will get better, their loose teeth will tighten up, their low back problems will get better. But the big surprise comes after 3 or 4 months. They wake up one morning and realize the spider veins and the varicose veins they've had for 25 years are either significantly better or maybe totally gone, because the elastic fibers have healed. Now, arteries take a little longer, take maybe a year or year and a half. And I've had people who have had early aneurysms. I've had people within a year or so, these aneurysms went back down to normal size. And we have an enormous amount of evidence in every laboratory animal you can name, doesn't matter, that this will in fact repair the fractured elastic fibers in arteries and repair the aneurysms. So you have everything to gain, nothing to lose by doing this. Early warning signal number 2. If you have liver spots or age spots in the back of your hands, face, arms, or neck, just even a half a dozen of them, you're looking at millions of these age spots or liver spots, or the pigment of aging, it's also called, in your brain, your eyes, your thyroid gland, lungs, heart, liver, kidneys, bone marrow. Every cell, every tissue, every organ of your body is going to have this pigment of aging. The technical name is ceroid, C-E-R-O-I-D, lipofucsin, and it's free radicals. It's actually trans fatty acids, rancid fat that's accumulated from a breakdown of the cell walls of cells that have died as a result of being attacked by free radicals and trans fatty acids. This is a deficiency of the trace mineral selenium, and it increases your risk of cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's disease many percent. Well, I'll give you an example. Dr. Gail Clark, the chief cardiologist of her hospital in St. Louis County, here in Missouri, was walking down the halls of her own hospital, 47 years old, chief cardiologist. I'm sure she was a vegetarian, at least move in that direction. I'm sure she ran or exercised or did something, because that's what cardiologists tell you to do, so I have to believe that she was honest and did that. 47 years old, she drops dead from a cardiomyopathy heart attack in the halls of her own hospital. You can see all the patients unhooking themselves from IVs and all these machines and everything, holding their gowns and fleeing out of the hospital. Would that instill confidence in you? The 47-year-old chief cardiologist of the hospital croaking right in front of your own door in the cardiac care unit? Of course not. A selenium deficiency disease. To deal with this, what you want to do is take 250 micrograms of selenium every day and eliminate fried foods and margarines and salad dressings with oils in them from your diet. Get rid of those free radicals and the trans fatty acids. And within 60 to 90 days, those liver spots and age spots will begin to fade and go away on the outside. And ladies and gentlemen, guess what? When they're fading and going away on the outside, they're actually fading and going away on the inside, and you will literally reduce your risk of heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease many percent. Early warning signal number 3. If you have cracked cuticles, if you have hangnails, if you have cracks on the side of your index finger, cracks on the ends of your thumb, and cracks on your heels, you have an omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency. If it was just a cosmetic thing, you could take Vaseline intensive skin care and rub that in your hands and feel pretty good. But there's more sinister things going on in the inside when you have cracked cuticles, hangnails, cracks on the side of your index finger, cracks on the ends of your thumb, and cracks on the ends of your heels. You in fact have abnormal stickiness in your platelets, your red blood cells, and white blood cells because of this omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency. What you want to do when you have these signs and symptoms is to take the minimum daily requirement, supplement with the minimum daily requirement of the omega-3 essential fatty acids. That's 3% of your total daily calorie intake, and that averages out for the average American to be about 9 grams a day, 9,000 milligrams. And within 60 to 90 days, those cracked cuticles, hangnails, the cracks on the side of your index finger, end of your thumb, and your heels will heal and go away. And when those signs and symptoms are healing and going away on the outside, the abnormal stickiness in your platelets, your red blood cells, and your white blood cells will be reduced significantly and add many, many healthier years to your life. Now, if you don't do this, what happens is you're at high risk for this thrombosis because of the stickiness of your platelets and so forth. And if you get a thrombosis of the coronary arteries of your heart, you get a ischemic type of heart attack. Shuts off the blood supply to your heart. If one of these thrombi or blood clots plugs up a small artery in your heart, you might get some local tissue damage. You might have a debilitated heart, but not necessarily life-threatening. If you get a major coronary artery that's plugged by a thrombi or a blood clot, you can actually be in a life-threatening situation. If you get a thrombosis in the brain, if it's a small one, you might get a stroke and be debilitated. If you get a large one, it can be a life-threatening situation. So don't forget 9 grams a day of the essential fatty acids. Early warning signal number 4, if you have noisy joints, if your neck sounds like a bag full of gravel, when you turn it, if your knees pop, your vertebrae pop, your fingers pop when you move them around, any of your joints make noise, they creak, grind, and so forth. If you have eyelid twitches, toe cramps, foot cramps, leg cramps, back muscle spasms, the odds are you have a calcium deficiency and you're headed towards compression fractures and spontaneous life-threatening fractures of the hip and major leg bones. You can have Dowger's hump, you can have all the terrible pain in your bones that are related to osteoporosis and all the complications of osteoporosis, such as having to use wheelchairs and walkers and things of this nature, debilitating you to one degree or another. But if you just supplement with calcium, remember, you're not going to see much benefit here. Because you can't retain much of the calcium you supplement with unless you're building that new bone matrix. Within 60 to 90 days, the odds are you're going to get a significant reduction or maybe even a total absence of the noise in your joints. The eyelid twitches, toe cramps, foot cramps, leg cramps, and back muscle spasms can get significantly better, maybe even totally go away. And this means that you're rebuilding the mineral reserves in your bones. And it doesn't matter if you're debilitated, doesn't matter if you have a restricted range of motion, doesn't matter if you're scheduled for a joint replacement surgery. You have everything to gain, nothing to lose, because you can always get the surgery. The surgery is always waiting for you, but you can't always get unsurgery. Early warning signal number 5 is a behavior as opposed to a physical problem. This is called pica and cribbing. This was actually something that we've known about in human beings for literally thousands of years, but it was really written up in 1975, 23 and a half years ago, by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. U.S. Department of Agriculture came out and said 23 and a half years ago that 95% of all Americans of all age groups are minerally deficient. This includes toddlers, preteens, teenagers, young adults, and seniors. And the most generic, the most universal symptom of mineral deficiencies is what we call pica and cribbing. It's a behavior that farmers will recognize. They'll see animals chewing on the fence rail. They'll see animals chewing on the half doors in the barn. They'll see animals chewing on the feed box instead of eating the feed. They'll eat the shingles off the roof, the paint off the barn. They'll eat dirt, wire, nails. And a good farmer recognizes this pica and cribbing behavior as a deficiency of minerals. They give the animals minerals to prevent them from eating the fence and having to rebuild it. They give them minerals to prevent large veterinary bills and to save the animal's life. Little toddlers will do the same thing, and I know many of you have seen little kids who use a spoon or a plastic shovel to eat dirt out of a garden or maybe out of a house plant. Maybe they'll eat sand out of a play box or at the beach. They'll eat caulking from around a window. They might even eat lead paint. Not because any of these things taste good, but because they're minerally deficient and they have cravings. Now, if you live in one of these modern dwellings, a house, an apartment, a condo, and everything is plastic and glass and metal and ceramics, nothing real, and even the house plants today are silk. There's no dirt in the house plants for kids to eat. They'll eat dog food, cat food. They'll eat the Tootsie Rolls out of the kitty litter box. not because that stuff tastes good, but because it's the only organic thing they have available to them in their search for minerals. Kids will swallow pennies because they like chewing on that metallic taste. They'll get their tongues caught on the galvanized fence during the wintertime by licking the fence because they like that taste. Women who are pregnant also get pike and cribbing, usually at 2 o'clock in the morning. They want the pickles and ice cream, Reese's peanut butter cups. They may want spicy curly French fries. And if these food items don't satisfy their cravings, they'll go out in midnight in a moonlit night and actually eat clay out of the backyard. This is an indication that they're minerally deficient. I used to have hundreds of women during each year come to me and say, "Doc, do I need a psychiatrist? I have this craving, I have this urge in the middle of the night to jump up out of bed and run out in the backyard and with a spoon eat clay." No, you're just minerally deficient. And what happens is the embryo is stealing minerals from them to develop properly, and unless the woman is replacing these minerals faster than the embryo is stealing them from her, she's going to develop pike and cribbing just like these toddlers and just like the animals. Adult women who are not pregnant, teenagers and adult men also get pike and cribbing, and these can be called cravings, they can be called binge-eating behaviors. You know, you just can't eat one. The munchies, if you have the munchies, if you're a chocoholic or a cocoholic, if you have to have the right type of salsa, if you nibble on trail mix or nuts all day at your desk, you're minerally deficient. Your body is screaming for minerals, not carbohydrates and not fats. And this is one of the reasons why Americans are 25 to 50% overweight. This is why weight loss programs never work over the long haul, because the basic root cause of an overweight challenge is mineral deficiency, because people have these cravings and these munchies and these binge-eating behaviors. And if you want anything to work for weight loss, you better be taking all the essential minerals as a supplement so you can get rid of those cravings. Nutrients. 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, and 3 essential fatty acids. And we haven't really thought much about these things over the years that man has been on Earth, because we've been spoiled. We spend more time thinking about detailing our car and the siding on our house and our lawns and where we're going to go to the movies this weekend than we do thinking about these essential nutrients on a daily basis. This is because our food plants, our grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, took carbon dioxide out of the air. They used the carbon atom, and using the sun's energy in a process known as photosynthesis, plants will actually manufacture long carbon chains. And many of these long carbon chains are starch and sugar and vitamins and amino acids and fatty acids. And this is where this malignant dumb belief, this is where this criminal belief came from, that you can get everything you need from your 4 food groups. During the 1930s, when they were identifying and studying vitamins and amino acids and fatty acids, nobody wanted to donate any money to study them, because everybody felt they would never get their investment back, either in money or time, because everybody knew that plants, grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts would manufacture vitamins and amino acids and fatty acids. And if everybody just ate right, they could get everything they needed from their 4 food groups. And that's where that stupid belief came from. Well, we've done this study, actually, for 220 years. Americans have eaten better than anybody else in the world. We've had the most food in the world, certainly. We've had the highest quality of food, yet we only live to be 75.5, half of our genetic potential for longevity. We only live on the average to be we rank 17th in longevity, we rank 19th in healthfulness, despite having the most expensive and the most technologically advanced healthcare system in the world. And so there's got to be something else missing here. What is it that we're missing? Why don't we rank number 1 on health? Why don't we rank number 1 for longevity? Well, if you want to stack things in your favor after you've avoided all the landmines we talked about, you want to be sure to supplement with all 16 vitamins, all 12 essential amino acids, and all 3 essential fatty acids. And of course, you can get this from Dr. Wallach's formula. Now, you notice I haven't said anything about minerals yet, because 2/3 of the essential nutrients are minerals, and just by sheer weight of numbers are important. Number 2, nothing that goes on in your body works without mineral cofactors. DNA and RNA and chromosomes won't work without mineral cofactors. Hormones and enzymes won't work without mineral cofactors. You cannot manufacture energy or utilize energy without mineral cofactors. You can't use oxygen without mineral cofactors. And you can't use vitamins or manufacture proteins from amino acids or utilize fatty acids without mineral cofactors. And yet plants cannot manufacture minerals the way they manufacture vitamins. Yes, plants, grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, do manufacture vitamin A and the B vitamins and vitamin C and vitamin E and vitamin K and biotin and folic acid and so forth. But plants cannot manufacture minerals. The only minerals you find in plants are in the soil in which they're grown, and unfortunately minerals never did, they don't now, nor will they ever occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. The only minerals you find in the crust of the earth are found in veins. They're found in veins like chocolate ripple ice cream. I can guarantee you there's not a single field in America that has all minerals in that field. And so the odds of you being able to get all essential minerals just by eating well is impossible. The same line of thinking would be for you to take a bag full of dirt from Texas, throw it into the oil pan of your car and say, I don't need to put oil in my car because I've got dirt from Texas in there. Now that's absurd, isn't it? That's just totally dumb. I mean, even an alcoholic with a 50-year-old rusted out Volkswagen wouldn't do that to his vehicle. And yet you're willing to throw away 50% of your longevity potential just to listen to a doctor who says you can get everything you need from your 4 food groups. But it's absurd because plants cannot manufacture minerals. Another problem we've had over the years, for 100 years, is the fact that agriculture in America only uses a simple fertilizer for the most part, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Farmers will use NPK for the next 1,000 years because it gives them the maximum yield in terms of tons and bushels per acre, and nobody gives a farmer any kind of tax break or cash incentive to make sure you get all essential minerals. Farmers are paid to grow tons and bushels per acre, and that's what they do a good job. And we also know that it only takes 5 to 10 years for crops to mine or deplete or extract whatever minerals might be in the soil. And we've been using NPK for 100 years, so you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that for 90 years we've been depleted, and this is why we spent $1.2 trillion for health care last year, more than the federal budget, $1.2 trillion for health care. We still only live to be 75.5 like we did 30 years ago. We just haven't gained much in the way of health or longevity despite all that expenditure. The crops, the grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts that are grown there are minerally deficient. As a result, the animals and people who eat these minerally deficient crops get mineral deficiency diseases. And the only way to prevent and cure them, these mineral deficiency diseases, is that you have to supplement with minerals. We've known about this problem for 62 years. Back in 1936, we began to put vitamins and minerals and trace minerals into animal feeds and feed pellets to make up this difference. And we've been able to make the agricultural industry, the livestock industry, profitable by doing this. We've been able to prevent and reverse and cure all kinds of diseases using these nutritional formulas. Otherwise, it'd be sticker shock for you. Your hamburger would cost you $275 a pound. Boneless, skinless chicken breast would be $450 a pound, and a dozen eggs would be $50 just to pay for the health care. Unfortunately for human beings, we got wonder drugs at the same time. We got sulfa drugs in 1936, we got penicillin in 1938, we got cortisone in 1942, and it was easy for the medical profession to con the American people. Give us enough money for medical research and we'll find a wonder drug to fix everything. Today the hue and cry is, give us enough medical research money and we'll find a genetically engineered protein to fix everything. Well, don't bank your life, don't bank your health and your longevity on it, because there will never be a genetically engineered protein. There will never be a wonder drug that will replace your need and repair your body. And if you buy into this belief and you live on Pepsis and Coca-Colas and candy and ding-dongs and white bread and all this other stuff, even if you supplement well, it doesn't matter, you're not going to make it to 100. There's 147 different diseases you can get from a calcium deficiency. They all fall under this big umbrella heading called osteoporosis. There's some variation on calcium deficiency, and osteoporosis is a horrible disease in terms of human misery and dollars expended. I want you to think of the vans and the buses with the lift gates on them and these chairs and beds that are called butt boosters. You know, they kind of lift you up because it's too painful to get up yourself. There's the walkers and the wheelchairs and the crutches and the canes, and then there's the ramps and elevators in private homes and public buildings. There's the special plumbing. There's the physical therapist. There's the pharmaceuticals and drugs for pain and anti-inflammatory effects. We have the orthopedic surgeons and the drugs and also the devices they put in your joints. $300 billion a year of our annual expenditure of $1.2 trillion is spent for nothing more than dealing with osteoporosis or calcium deficiency. In any other industry, they'd be shut down and the perpetrators put in jail for fraud, because we already know how to deal with this for just a few pennies a day. Gingivitis, pyorrhea, periodontal disease, loose teeth, bridges and plates is nothing more than osteoporosis of the facial bones and the jaw bones. You're going to see osteoporosis in the face and jaws 20 to 50 years before you can recognize osteoporosis in the large bones of your arms, your vertebrae, your pelvis, and your legs, because the bones surrounding the roots of your teeth are less than 1 millimeter thick. Where are you going to see osteoporosis first? In millimeter thick bones in your face and jaw, or bones in your arms and legs that are as big around as a quarter or 50-cent piece? Well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. So if you have receding gums, gingivitis, pyorrhea, periodontal disease, loose teeth, bridges and plates, and it doesn't matter if you're 10 years old, 25 years old, 50, 75, or 100, you already have osteoporosis. Arthritis, 85% of all arthritis is what we call wear and tear arthritis. This is osteoarthritis, degenerative arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis of the vertebrae. Even though they have weird names, they're nothing more than osteoporosis of the ends of your bones, the joint ends of the bones. Make a list of all your health challenges: liver spots, age spots, white, gray, or silver hair, a neck that sounds like a bag full of gravel, loose teeth, receding gums. if you have low back problems, if you have noisy joints, your knees and shoulders pop, if you have heel spurs, if you have bone spurs, if you have insomnia, if you have to take a nap at 3 o'clock every afternoon, if you have hypertension, if you have low blood sugar, if you have diabetes, write all these things down, and then every 2 weeks go through the list and see if any of them are getting better. And I'll make you this guarantee. After about 90 days, the odds are you're going to see some of them that are recognizably better. You'll see some of them that are significantly better, and many of them may also be gone. Hypertension, we know, has nothing to do with salt. Salt restriction won't prevent it. Salt restriction won't fix it. That's because as much as 85%, and this has been shown over and over and over in the last 5 years in all research that has to do with hypertension, as much as 85% of hypertension has to do with a calcium deficiency. So it's not too surprising that people who use the formula for loose teeth and receding gums and osteoporosis, that within 60, 90 days, that many of them are able to significantly reduce or maybe even totally wean off their blood pressure medication. Insomnia, we know that almost all insomnia is due to a calcium deficiency, and so if you supplement with the formula, you're going to have the best night's sleep you've ever had in your life. Kidney stones, bone spurs, heel spurs, and calcium deposits, the medical profession has the malignant dumb belief if you have kidney stones, bone spurs, heel spurs, and calcium deposits, you have too much calcium in your diet. The first nutritional advice they give you is to give up dairy, and for God's sakes, don't take any supplements with calcium in it. In fact, when you have kidney stones, bone spurs, heel spurs, and calcium deposits, you have raging osteoporosis. You need more calcium, more magnesium, not less. PMS, the formula has actually saved thousands of marriages. Usually men who will call me up or run up and give me a hug and say, "Doc, thank you. You've saved my marriage." And at first, I didn't know what they were talking about. And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, my wife used to have PMS so bad that when she'd go outside to hang up the laundry, the dogs would crawl under the porch whimpering. The kids, the neighbor kids, would march around the block screaming that the witch was out, kind of a warning. And out of the 10 years we've been married, my wife and I have argued for 2 weeks out of every month for the 10 years we've been married. And the only reason we stuck together was we had 4 kids, and we're ready to split the sheets now because the kids are old enough to kind of understand what's going on. I can't handle it anymore. As a parting gift of love, I gave my wife a 3-month supply of the formula. And just like you said, her loose teeth tightened up, just like putting cement around a fence post. Her low back problems went away, but the most wonderful thing happened just after 60 days. She became the most wonderful person that ever walked the earth, and all her PMS symptoms went away, both physical and emotional. And our marriage has never been stronger, and we can't thank you enough. Low back pain, according to Harvard Medical School 3 years ago, they came out and said that if anybody gets disc surgery for low back pain, it's medical fraud, because disc problems don't cause low back pain. Disc problems can cause tingling and numbness and paralysis, yes, but not low back pain. If you have low back pain, the odds are you have cramps and spasms of large muscle groups inside and outside your back, which can misalign your vertebrae. It's called subluxation and can make you very uncomfortable. You can have bone spurs and calcium deposits, arthritis, osteoporosis. These are the things that cause low back pain. So before you submit to disc surgery, you can always get the surgery, but you can't always get unsurgeried. Okay, now because most Americans have not yet heard this talk, they will still spend on the average between $25,000 and $250,000 and voluntarily undergo 5 to 10 surgical procedures for nothing more than the top 10 calcium deficiency diseases. The number 3 killer of Americans is diabetes, blindness of all kinds, kidney failure, kidney dialysis, kidney transplant. Diabetes contributes to the number 1 killer of Americans, cardiovascular disease. Diabetes contributes to the need for amputations of toes, feet, and legs for ulcers that won't heal and gangrene. And in most cases, you can save your toes, feet, and legs if you're willing to put in 4 to 6 months of some pretty slimy, stinky work, but most doctors don't encourage you to do that because they don't feel they get paid enough. And when your doctor diagnoses a new diabetic in his office, he's going to get very excited because he knows over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to go through all these health challenges as the common complications of diabetes. And as a result, you're worth to him $250,000 to $500,000. Well, this is criminal, ladies and gentlemen, because we learned in animals in 1957, 41 years ago, that we could prevent and cure adult onset type 2 diabetes simply by supplementing with 2 trace minerals, chromium and vanadium. 13 years ago, in 1985, the medical school at the University of Vancouver, British Columbia came out and said the trace mineral vanadium alone could replace insulin for adult onset diabetics, who make up 85% of the diabetic population. Science Diet dog food has 40 minerals, always contains lithium, chromium, vanadium, and selenium. Ralston Purina laboratory rat pellets contains 28 minerals, always contains lithium, chromium, vanadium, and selenium. And I'll give anybody in this room a crisp new $100 bill if you can find me a human infant formula off the shelf of a grocery store that has more than 12 minerals in it. None of them contain lithium, chromium, vanadium, and only 2, Pro Soybean Infamil, put selenium into their formulas, and as a result, they have 12. Our dogs get 40 minerals, our rats get 28, and our kids get 12 or less. You can begin to see why we spent $1.2 trillion for healthcare last year and why our kids who are 3, 5, 6, 8, 10 years old are winding up with diseases that used to be reserved for people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Simply because we don't get the basic raw materials to develop properly and to maintain and repair ourselves from the very, very beginning. There's 3 things that we have to briefly talk about. Number 1 are the different types of minerals. First type of minerals is ground up rocks. These are things called metallic minerals, elemental minerals, inorganic minerals. They're not organically bound in any way. They can be seabed minerals, clays, dolomite, azomite, Mount Marulanite. They can be things like oyster shell, eggshell, limestone, coral calcium, which is a sexy type of limestone. Could be tums. Could be calcium lactate, gluconate, citrates. There could be sulfates, oxides, and carbonates. These are nothing but ground up rocks, and your digestive physiology begins to change, and then this ability to absorb these minerals, these metallic or inorganic minerals, drops precipitously. Many times people will ask me, you know, I've been taking 2,000 milligrams of calcium every day for 20 years. Never missed. Faithfully 2,000 milligrams of calcium every day for 20 years, and I still have loose teeth and receding gums. I still have low back problems. I have noisy joints. I have arthritis and osteoporosis. I've had kidney stones. I have low back problems. I have everything you can name, insomnia, hypertension, and I've been taking 2,000 milligrams of calcium every day faithfully for 20 years. What gives? What kind do you take? Well, I take calcium lactate, calcium gluconate, Tums. I take calcium carbonate, limestone, oyster shell, eggshell. Well, there's your problem. And if you use 1,000 milligram calcium lactate, calcium gluconate, calcium citrate, calcium carbonate tablet, you're not getting 1,000 milligrams of calcium because 86% or 860 milligrams is either lactose or citrate or carbonate, whatever it might be. And only 14%, 140 milligrams, is metallic or elemental calcium. Let's use 10% for a usability factor. It's certainly a fair number. And 10% of 140 milligrams is 14. So if you take 2 of the 1,000 milligram calcium lactate, calcium gluconate, calcium citrate, calcium carbonate tablets, you're not getting 2,000 milligrams of calcium a day. You're getting 2 times 14 or 28 milligrams. You get 2,000 milligrams of usable and absorbable calcium from a 1,000 milligram calcium lactate, calcium gluconate, calcium citrate, or calcium carbonate tablet. You have to take 30 of those with each meal, 90 a day, almost a full 100 tablet bottle. And at the cheapest, $5 a bottle for calcium gluconate, you're looking at $150 a month just for calcium. If you use these inorganic minerals as your sole source of optimal amounts of the essential minerals, you're looking at $800 a month. I mean, we're not talking about something that's economical here. Plus, you're going to develop what my patients used to affectionately call BNF disease. When you take in 90 tablets of anything a day, you're going to develop BNF disease, which is an abbreviation for belching and farting. You're going to sound like an elephant out in the jungle with a horrible gastrointestinal problem. And you know you have BNF disease when your spouse has to throw a canary in the bathroom to see if it's safe to go in there. Okay, back in the 1960s, the animal industry, the ag industry, came up with what we call chelated minerals, because a farmer is not dumb enough to put $1's worth of minerals in an animal's mouth and have 99 cents come out in the manure. So we learned in the ag industry in the 60s that we could add amino acids or proteins or enzymes, which are proteins that do work, to the elemental mineral, and increases the absorbability tenfold. And if you look at a good vitamin and mineral tablet or capsule today, you will see that the minerals are a mixture of metallic minerals and chelated minerals. But the way that animals and people are designed to consume and absorb minerals is in the plant-derived form. They're up to 98% available to you because this is the way that animals and people are designed to consume and absorb their minerals. We're not designed to eat ground-up rocks in any way, shape, or form. We don't have the teeth and the digestive tract to do it. Plant-derived minerals are liquid in form. They're small particle size, 7 to 10,000 times smaller than a red blood cell. They're negatively charged. These 3 factors together give you the absorbability. Now, the way it's supposed to be in the great scheme of things, ladies and gentlemen, is our food plants, our grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, are supposed to take the metallic minerals out of the soil, convert them to minerals for their own use, and then animals and people eat these mineral-enriched plants. Unfortunately, the system is not perfect. Number 1, plants cannot manufacture minerals. Number 2, the only minerals you're going to find in our food plants are the minerals that are in the soil, and we know that minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. We know we've only used a simple fertilizer. We've only used a simple fertilizer over the last 100 years, NPK, and it only takes 5 to 10 years for plants to extract or mine or deplete whatever minerals might have been in the field. So we know that for 90 years we've been almost totally depleted of nutritional minerals here in our farm and range soils in America. The most horrible reason why Americans rank 17th in longevity and 19th in healthiness, despite having the most expensive and the most technologically advanced healthcare system in the world, is because whenever a person would take a newspaper article to their doctor and say, "Hey doc, look at this wonderful newspaper article on this vitamin or this mineral, and for example selenium," Doc, look at this wonderful article on selenium. It says here, if I take 250 micrograms of selenium every day, it'll reduce my risk of cancer by 50 to 80%, depending on the type of cancer. If I take 250 micrograms of selenium every day, just 1/4 of 1 milligram, it'll reduce my risk of a cardiomyopathy heart attack to almost zero and eliminate the possibility of the need for a $750,000 heart transplant. Shouldn't I supplement with a little bit of selenium? And here's where doctors will protect their turf. If they're wearing these little half glasses, they'll put them down on the ends of their nose for effect. If they're wearing regular glasses, they'll take them off and waggle them at the patient. That'd be real dumb to supplement with that selenium, because that stuff can be toxic, you know. You could overdose. And besides, you can get everything you need from your 4 food groups. Those little sentences have killed more Americans than all the foreign enemies put together in the 220 years we've been a nation, because plants cannot manufacture minerals, and it's impossible to get everything you need from your 4 food groups. I hope you've enjoyed my message. Live long and prosper.
Information and statements regarding dietary supplements discussed have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Thank you for listening to this presentation, and remember to contact the person that sent this to you. For more presentations and books that go into greater detail, go to docwallachmedia.com. And be well.
Hey all you Dr. Wallach supporters and longevity fans out there. Most of you at some point will have come up against this NutriSmart bashing of Dr. Wallach. There are a few articles that are published specifically to tarnish Dr. Wallach and his message. And I have actually written this whole book. This was a few years ago. I wrote a full-length book in rebuttal to these vicious attacks on Dr. Wallach. I believe every objection that you are going to encounter in the field is addressed in this book. It's absolutely a great resource for you to have as a distributor. And if you do ever have anybody coming up to you saying, I heard what you said about Dr. Wallach and I was going to look into some of his vitamins, but I came up against this article on the internet, NutriSmart article is probably the one they read. So it's a great deal, guys. I put it up very cheap. It's just another tool in our toolbox. And the Amazon link is in the description of this video. Make sure to check out our food YouTube channel called Notus Foods. This is 100% Dr. Wallach approved. And the chef that is preparing the food here and teaching you how to follow Dr. Wallach's food guidelines and Dr. Glidden's food guidelines. He's an industry professional, over 22 years experience and a college diploma to back it up. And we do have experienced cooks and bakers as well, working on content for the YouTube channel Notus Foods and the Instagram channel Notus Foods. It's 100% gluten-free, oil-free, all the stuff about burning fats and all of the rules that you would need to know or follow. We're here to teach it to you here, as well as give you tons of ideas for recipes, individual dishes, and meals. Of course, in the near future, we do have a cookbook coming out. Stay tuned for it. And if you'd like to talk to us directly, you can call us. Actually, you can call Judy. She's downriver Detroit. You can call from anywhere in the US, Canada, Mexico, UK, Australia, New Zealand, any other country. You want to email us or send us a DM on whatever app that you want to contact us on. Instagram is super convenient for us. And that's for any sales or product information in those countries, or any distributor information,